Ahem.
Caught you just clearing your throat there.
Excellent. That's the way we like to start these shows.
So
A good
professional. So
throat
good.
clear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, better to have it clear than not clear. I
True.
wouldn't want to hear that.
Speaking of, I was gonna try to segue this into the cold open I had planned, but there just isn't a way. Hey, Jack.
Hello. Hello, Ben. How are
What would
you?
you do if your spouse Catherine came home one day and was like, Jack, I saw a dragon. I encountered a dragon in my place of work.
If she
Would you
encountered a
believe her?
dragon in her place of work, I'd assume she's talking about her boss.
Oh,
No,
oh
I'm
dear.
kidding. He's actually a very nice person.
Yeah, we have to say that because he might be watching.
I find that unlikely, but sure, why not?
A secret Space 1999 fan.
Yeah. Stranger things have happened, like a dragon turning up in the Ultra Probe, for example. Very weird thing to have happen.
Well done.
Anyway, let's do the intro. Welcome back to the Security Hazard Show, a show so unofficial that even Harry Rule refuses to protect us.
And I'm here with a man. He's not from the Dragon's Domain. It's more like the Lazoon's Domain. He's the master of all things security hazard. It's Jack Knoll.
Hello. Welcome. And, well, some say, and there's no other way of saying this, some say he's got the lyrics for Aquamarina tattooed on his inner thigh. It's Ben Wolfpage.
Not entirely inaccurate.
Not entirely inaccurate. You know what? I brought up the subject, but I don't want to go any further into that, to be honest.
That's probably for the best. Hey,
All
Jack,
right.
let's talk about what's coming up on the show today.
What's coming up on the show today? Well, basically, we've got a special assignment. We're going to be talking about the Space 1999 episode Dragon's Domain. We've both watched it. We've both got our thoughts on it. We've both got our feelings and memories and things like that to talk about. We've had some reviews from our viewers and listeners as well on social media that we're going to be reading out. But first of all, just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. Wanted to do a little bit of security hazard, general news, general updates, because we've had some interesting things going on. And Ben, I know you've been working hard on your own things as well, so I want to talk about those as well. So, where to start, Ben? Where's the best place to start with this?
Oh goodness, well, I mean, when you said housekeeping, I thought I was going to have to run downstairs and clean the toilet, but thankfully you mean security hazard housekeeping.
This is 5% more fun than that, probably.
Well, I think the most important thing to start with is that we've started something very exciting, and that is our new Patreon.
A Patreon? Ben,
yes.
What's a Patreon?
Well, a Patreon is another way you can support us. And we've had, in the past, we've been sending you to our Ko-Fi page, the Security Hazard Ko-Fi page, which is kind of like, functions more like a tip jar. There's ways that
it's a little more personal to me as well. Like, that's something I've had set up for a while, long before we started this show and things like that. So,
right.
Yeah.
This Patreon is going to be more inclusive of all the things we're doing. It has more features and more opportunities for us to do some really cool content, for lack of a better word. I know the word content gets overused, but we're gonna do so many different types of things that
it's the word that kind of best describes everything we're gonna do, because we're gonna do special videos, special podcasts, probably some blog posts on there as well, like just lots of different things. So it's the word I've seen used is like a multimedia hub. That's how I try and describe security hazard to people. And the Patreon is going to kind of be very much along those lines as well. So yeah,
I
it's
like
going to
that.
be
A hub.
a hub of, a home, dare I say, a nice homely home for everyone to enjoy. So yeah, if you like the Jerry Anderson stuff that we do, the content that we do on Security Hazard, then there's basically going to be more of that on the Patreon. And look, yeah, we don't. I always say the phrasing I use is give what you can, only if you can. So much of Security Hazard is totally free to the public, and I want it to be that way because I want it to be inclusive. I want everyone to feel like there's something for them to enjoy, something for fans to be really passionate about, and that's how I've always enjoyed Security Hazard being, and that's the way I want it to stay. So things like this show, me and Ben talking to each other every week on the internet, that remains totally accessible to everyone. Security Hazard minis, the little videos that I do talking about merchandise, all the stuff on the shelves behind me, that stuff remains free. As well as what's starting on Friday, June 6th, which on the blog, on the Security Hazard blog, Space Precinct reviews, episode reviews, which, oh my word, get ready, because I have a lot, turns out I have a lot to say about Space Precinct.
I cannot wait, Jack.
You're gonna have to clear your whole afternoon basically to just get through one of those Space Precinct reviews. So
and all of that hard work that you put in on those Space Precinct reviews, it just goes out there into the world for free, just because you're a fan and you're passionate about this Jerry Anderson stuff.
Yeah, and I do it because I enjoy it, and that's the main thing. Is I want to continue just enjoying it and continue having a great time with it. But I've also been told that people do want to support it and do want to be passionate and enjoy Security Hazard and the way it runs and the way it exists. So if people want to help with that, I'm not going to stop them.
We can always use your help. So please do support us over on our new Patreon. You can find that in the description. There'll be a link to it there.
Yep. And patreon.com/security hazard. Nice and simple.
That's it. Yeah. And it'll be linked on all of our social media, on securityhazard.net, all over the place.
Yeah. And even though we've just started it, there's already things on there for people to enjoy. Including
it comes
preloaded with stuff, but we're going to keep trying to add to it as much as we possibly can. We're going to keep adding things to it for people to enjoy. But already on there, you can actually get a sort of bonus episode of this very podcast. Ben, do you want to tell people what that is?
Well, we called it episode 0. It's sort of a test episode for this show. When Jack and I were discussing doing a live show, we were like, can we really go live every week, do a live podcast on the air? Mm-hmm. And we wanted to test the waters, see if we could really pull it off. And rightly or wrongly, we concluded that we could pull it off.
Yeah.
So now we have a show. Yeah. But before all that, you can see the show in its embryonic form. And there's some quite fun stuff in there, like talking about the investigator, talking about the very hungry money box, which is a top tier episode of one of the top tier Jerry Anderson shows, Torchy the Battery Boy. Yeah. Oh man.
Oh it's
unstoppable.
Yeah.
So definitely something you're going to want to see.
Yeah. Just a good bit of fun. Yeah. If you want a little bit more, Security Hazard show, then there is a hidden episode that can only be seen on Patreon. But as well as that, I also just kind of went through my video archive and was like, what has somehow been hidden for a really long time that I
hidden gems
with Patreon? And the one thing I found was, speaking of Torchy, was the video trailer that I did back in 2015 for when myself and my poor wife, Catherine, dressed up as Twizzle and Torchy. We did a cosplay. Now, I'm not a big cosplayer, but we did a cosplay for the Andercon 2015 event. So if you want to see me dressed up as Torchy the Battery Boy, which of course you do, then you can head over to Patreon and you can see that. And then there's also a video of me playing the Captain Scarlet PlayStation 2 game, which is absolutely terrible. Absolutely one of the worst things that's ever been made, ever. But never not the video. The video is excellent, but the game itself
Yes.
is atrocious. So
I
if
have
you
to
want to
say,
watch that, you can head over there and watch that as well.
as someone who's never played the game and has been tempted to, because I mean, it is a Captain Scarlet game. You
Right.
know, it's a tempting proposition. I wanted to know more about the game, and so I was like, well, I'll just watch Jack's video, and I think I got far more out of the video than I ever could have gotten out of playing the game. Just from the experience of watching you play the game, and it's nice to just some of the videos that you create are really nice, like your Thunderbird's 2086 model build. They're very nice, like ambient videos you can put on in the background while you're accomplishing some mundane task like cleaning the toilet. We're back on housekeeping.
Back to cleaning the toilet. Yes.
Yes. You can just throw these videos on and they're super relaxing.
Cleaning the toilet would be an appropriate activity when it comes to the Captain Scarlet PlayStation 2 game. That is for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Good
yeah,
heavens.
I can definitely see that. Yeah. So that's the big news really is patreon.com/security hazard. Head over there. All sorts of different membership tiers to sign up to. So hopefully you can find something that works for you. Now, I already mentioned the Space Precinct reviews. Again, that's starting on securityhazard.net from next Friday, June 6th. Going to be reviewing an episode of Space Precinct every single week. The first review, I haven't totally finished editing it yet, but it's currently sitting at 15,000 words. So if you want some Space Precinct,
it's
ranting,
coming whether you like it or not.
Yeah, whether you like it or not, that's going to be there. So I wanted to make sure people knew that was coming.
That sounds absolutely orbital.
Yeah.
What episode order are you going in there, Jack?
Production order. For better or worse, production order. So starting with Double Duty and going to be doing some weird stuff like Death Watch. Famously a 2-part episode, but produced separately. I am not going to do Death Watch Part 1 and Death Watch Part 2. I am going to split it up as it is in production order with a whole bunch of episodes sitting in between. It's really weird. So yeah, production order for better or worse. That's what I'm doing. Yeah.
And some of these episodes you've not seen before. I think I'm correct in saying.
That's true. Space Precinct is one of those shows where I've often sat down to start watching it, and then other things have kind of drawn me away a little bit. And I know for a fact, I've been told many, many times that Space Precinct gets better as it goes along. So I'm getting over that hump of the first few episodes. And don't worry, I'm going to have a lot of fun reviewing those first episodes as well, because it's always fun
for different
things
reasons
that are a little bit rubbish, let's be honest. I'm looking forward to getting into the really good stuff. And from what I've seen so far, it does get good.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So
if you've never gotten into Space Precinct before, consider this, Jack doing it on Security Hazard, your sign to check out Space Precinct, because it has it all. It's both, it has episodes that are so bad that they're good, and it has episodes that are so good that they're even gooder.
They're just underrated. They're very, very underrated.
It is really an underrated classic of 90s sci-fi, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, so 90s. Oh, anyway. Like, we're not talking about Space Precinct today. We're talking about Space 1999. So I want to get there. First, Ben, I want to give you an opportunity, because you've got some stuff going on your own YouTube channel.
I do.
Very, very busy, or we've been very busy, because one of the first things we want to cover is our 48-hour film that we made called Real Spring. Tell us.
Yeah. Well, the 48-hour film, in case you're not familiar, is a challenge competition where different organizations put out a call for filmmakers. We sign up, and then on the Friday night, we get prompts that we have to include in the film that we make, and we have 48 hours to make a film from scratch. This particular challenge was a puppet filmmaking 48-hour film challenge. So in addition to the complication of having to throw together a film in 48 hours, we also had to figure out what we were going to use for puppets, how we were going to create these miniature worlds, and also incorporate all the themes. So and we were working on it together from separate continents in separate time zones. So all of these complications created this kind of zany madcap weekend experience. And the end product of that is a film called Real Spring. You can watch it on the Cinemarionette YouTube channel. That's my YouTube channel. If you subscribe over here on Jack's channel, please do subscribe on mine as well. YouTube.com/@Cinemarionette. That's cinema and marionette put together. Hey, see what I did there?
Very
and
clever.
You can
very Jerry Anderson. The whole thing is really Jerry Anderson. I love the idea that we sort of had to, dare I say, set up our own AP Films unit, but we had 48 hours to do whole thing. You know, it works. You know, I'm very, very proud of what we came up with.
So am I.
I really, it's the sort of idea you never would have come up with normally. But the pressure that it puts you under to come up with something within 48 hours, it just produces some really fun and interesting results. So yeah,
that's part of the magic of the 48 is having that adrenaline rush of creativity, which is really really fun.
Yeah, but your YouTube channel also hosts all sorts of interesting things, like the you put up the X-Bomber Starfleet X-Bomber pilot recently, and things like that.
Yeah. Which I think is the first time it's been uploaded to YouTube with English subtitles. So if you've never seen the Starfleet or X-Bomber, as it's known in Japanese, its original pilot film, which is a 13-minute presentation, something a bit different from what you're used to in Starfleet. There's a few key changes that got made to making the show, and I'll eventually cover those on my Starfleet blog, X-Blogger, which is starfleetxbomber.substack.com. And you can find all sorts of crazy articles. I'm working on one right now about an episode that I just uploaded called Bloody Mary's Promotion, which is a lost episode of Starfleet. So there's, you can
Starfleet, crazy.
You can find lots of Starfleet stuff. You can find original short films that I've made, other 48s from the past, and all kinds of other interesting Anderson-related stuff, like Interstir, South African Anderson-inspired puppet show. Have an episode of that up there, and more of that to come. So subscribe and hit the notification bell, and you won't regret it.
You won't regret. You won't. It's genuine. What I love about your channel, Ben, is it's something different every single time.
It is.
You like a bit of variety. I mean, it's all puppet flavored. It's all filmmaking flavored. And Jerry Anderson flavored. But I never quite know what to expect next, which I find fun. Those are my favorite kinds of YouTube channels. Is where it's clearly just a person who is passionate about a particular topic and just goes all out on it. And I think that's great. So
yeah, and it's the vibe of my audience as well, which I really love. The comments I get from people, my subscribers are all also really passionate and interested in the things that I'm talking about. So it's a fun little community we've got going on. So
lovely.
Feel free to join us.
Yes, absolutely. But right now, we've got an important thing we need to do. Dare I say it? We need to do a special assignment.
I have received a report from Spectrum Intelligence. It will mean I have a special assignment for you.
Oh, beautiful.
But it's a sewer.
We need a team.
I hope you will forgive me.
Ben, today we are watching the Space 1999 episode Dragon's Domain. Where to begin? Where's a good place to start with this?
Well, I guess we'll start by talking about how we first encountered Space 1999. I think and Dragon's Domain in particular. Your blog, Security Hazard, doesn't have a lot of, and your channel in general doesn't have a lot of Space 1999 related content.
That's very true. That's very true. And that is it's not because I don't It's not because I don't like Space 1999. It's because I didn't grow up with it. I think the first time I encountered Space 1999 was when it was being repeated for the first time on ITV4. If anyone, I don't even, does that channel even still exist? I have no idea
I think so.
whatsoever, but I think so. And maybe they even do still repeat Anderson stuff from time to time. I don't know. Anyway, they used to repeat the live action Jerry Anderson shows quite often. And when Space 1999 came into that mix, I remember sitting down to watch Breakaway for the first time. Very excited, and it felt like a big event. It definitely immediately stood out to me, like, wow, look at the huge production values of this. Like, what an amazing looking piece of television. This sort of feels like, I was watching it sort of thinking, yeah, this is what Jerry Anderson always wanted to make. That's how it always struck me. And so Dragon's Domain, I kept watching the ITV4 repeats as often as I could. They were sometimes scheduled at sort of weird times of the day. But I probably did see Dragon's Domain for the first time in amongst all of that. And it wasn't until later when I sort of got involved with fandom and, realized that there were other Jerry Anderson fans out there in the world. Amazing. That I learned that Dragon's Domain had quite a reputation behind it as being one of the most celebrated Space 1999 episodes. But I can't say it's one that I've ever gone back to revisit more often than any of the others. Generally speaking, I still sort of, when I do rewatch Space 1999, it's sort of in amongst all the others, and it's just there, but it doesn't necessarily make a huge impression on me in the same way that it does for others. I get the feeling that other people hold this one in really high regard. What about you, Ben? Where do you sit with Dragon's Domain and Space 1999 in general? I'm sensing you're a fan.
What gave you that idea? Space 1999 is definitely in the top rankings. I avoid ranking the Anderson shows because it would be a constantly rotating order. Yeah. But Space 1999 is always near the top of that range. I had the DVDs when I was a child. It was one of the best Christmas presents I've ever received, was the big Space 1999 mega set.
Which
was quite a high ticket item. Did not expect to get that for Christmas, but I did. Watched it mostly on a portable DVD player in the Linen Club.
Remember those? Oh my goodness.
It was a different,
that was some amazing tech. My brother had one, and it made those long car journeys fly by.
Goodness.
Wow. Amazing. Sorry. Thank you for reminding me that portable DVD players were a thing.
Blast from the past. This is a tangent, but one that I love to share.
Please do.
I bought,
that's what the show's for.
when I first got Thunderbirds on DVD, I didn't have a DVD player, and we didn't have one in the house. I just had to. I found out that Thunderbirds was on DVD, and you could get all of it in one box. And so I begged, borrowed, and stole the money to buy Thunderbirds on DVD, and then just looked at it for a really long time until I got my portable DVD player. That was my first way of watching it, and it was a 2.5-inch screen. So we're talking about something
that's tiny.
It's not much bigger than a Game Boy screen.
Right. Oh my goodness.
And that was how I first watched Space 1999. And to enhance the experience, I converted the linen closet at the top of the stairs into my own personal space, so that I could scrunch up in it, tiny little Ben,
through choice,
with his tiny little. Well, because it was cinematic. You could lock yourself in the box, and that was how I watched Space 1999. And of course, that was a really interesting way to watch Earthbound. I don't mind telling you that
squeezed into a dark box. Yeah, I
burst out of that closet like Elton John.
Oh,
I
wow.
was really compressed in there at the end of
That
that
gives me a
episode.
really interesting image of your childhood being shut in a cupboard watching Space
Doesn't it?
1999,
Doesn't
but
it?
through
Yeah.
choice.
Through choice. No one forced me to go in there. Yeah, so that's how I would have watched Dragon's Domain for the first time. Like yourself, it is not one that stood out to me as much at the time. I think the last 6 or so episodes of Space 1999 lean heavily on, I'm talking in production order,
And
lean
year one, I assume you mean just
year
year
one.
one. Yeah.
I do mean year one. Thank you. Lean heavily on stock music. So there's not as much. Obviously, Barry Gray only did scores for the first few. And so there's less Barry Gray music in them. Dragon's Domain is
Mm.
included in that. It has some very nice classical music, really well used.
Yeah,
But it's
really well
not
used. Yeah.
it's not Barry Gray. So I think that was a contributing factor in me not liking those later episodes quite as much or feeling a bit more distant from them.
Okay.
Part of the reason that this episode had such resonance at the time that it came out was that there wasn't very much science fiction horror available,
Okay.
and certainly not a lot on TV. So the impression of the monster was, and it is conceptually a really remarkable monster. Prefigures Alien
Yeah.
in quite a few ways. So if you're a fan of Alien at all, then this is something that would definitely be required viewing. And over the years, it's really grown on me to become one of my favorite episodes. There's a lot that I like about it.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to like there. I agree. I think the difference, the monster is the key thing that divides people when it comes to this episode. Anyone who watched it at the time in the 70s seems to have a very vivid memory of, yeah, that monster was scary and it was something totally different that you didn't normally see on TV at that time. Whereas, dare I say, slightly younger fans like you and me come to it now and we go, well, that's not exactly the most convincing monster I've ever seen on TV before.
Sure.
So it doesn't quite pack the same punch that it would have done. That being said, I think in a way that almost gives it a slightly different flavor, where the fact that the monster feels slightly, dare I say, slightly artificial, actually gives it a slightly different spin, a slightly different flavor, which I'm sure we'll kind of get into later, because as with any good year one episode of Space 1999, there is also questions about the very nature of existence that are kind of laced in there as well.
Yes.
Which
For
is
me,
also what, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
For me, the kind of pinnacle of the Anderson production method is kind of your run of like Stingray, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, where they sort of got really deep into the puppetry aspect. But by the time they get to and this is sort of this is the end of year one of Space 1999. It's the second to last episode of year one of Space 1999, which means it's the very end of the association between Jerry and Sylvia Anderson that began way back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of, in many ways, and as you say, it's the sort of thing that Jerry Anderson always wanted to do. So in many ways, it's sort of the peak of that, that whole era of time from way back in the Adventures of Twizzle, leading all the way up to Dragon's Domain.
I suppose so. Yeah.
It's weirdly, but also as in preparation for this episode, I listened to Jerry Anderson's DVD commentary for Dragon's Domain.
Ooh, I've never done that.
In the episode, he only talks about all the problems that they had making this episode and making Space 1999 in general. And that's something that you find with Sylvia Anderson as well. When she talks about Space 1999, she doesn't have nearly the fond memories of it as she does of, say, UFO. This era, of course, what was going on in their personal lives undoubtedly played a factor in that negative remembrance. But the incredible pressure that they were under to make this show, and the amount of money involved, and the caliber of talent, and the kind of personality and ego that they were dealing with, and
Good and
like,
bad. Yeah.
good and bad. Even some of the like technical problems of like, there were a lot of union strikes happening, industrial action of all kinds in the UK at that time.
Yes.
So lots and lots and lots of challenges. But also, I think thematically, they sort of come fully into the themes that they were sort of heading towards all along in a weird way, which is sort of like determinism versus free will, and do we have a choice, which is something, as as you know, Jack, from our conversations off the air, sort of important in my work. I'm really interested in that kind of paradox of like determinism versus free will.
Right.
And something that I think that puppetry is a really good metaphor for. So I think it's interesting that they sort of get into that in Space 1999, their final show to get together.
Yeah.
But they've abandoned the medium that sort of brought them to it in a way.
I
Sort of
see, yeah.
Subconsciously.
Yeah.
I'm theorizing here. Of course, they've never come out and said, "Oh yeah, our shows were about determinism and free will." But that's sort of my,
look at it that way. Yeah, definitely.
Ben's critical theoretical approach to the Jerry Anderson and Sylvia Anderson canon. Yeah, so it's an episode of like of peaks and valleys, I guess, kind of the ultimate lows and the ultimate highs of the Anderson oeuvre, if you like.
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly go over some of the key facts behind this particular episode. So, written by Christopher Penfold, who of course was behind. Was he basically script editor for the whole series, for that first season?
Basically, he fulfilled that function. Him and Johnny Byrne wrote almost all of the first season together. So he's the guy. Right.
And they're directed by Charles Crichton, who had again done so many Space 1999 episodes, a very celebrated director in his own right, and it shows. He definitely had his own spin on how to bring this episode to life, and I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And then just in terms of timeline, we are talking about the first UK transmission being on Thursday, October the 23rd, 1975 at 7 p.m. for ATV and Yorkshire Television. So just wanted to get that one out there.
Thanks very much. Yeah. It's worth noting that this is the final pairing of Christopher Penfold and Charles Crichton. It's the last time that they did a Space 1999 sort of in tandem as that writer-director combo. So it's some ways the ultimate achievement of their combination, but that's
absolutely
up for debate, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, okay. The thing that makes this episode stand out for me more than some of the others is that it kind of has a different lead actor in it for most of the story. The character Tony Cellini very much takes center stage, played by Gianni Garco. Ben, you had the opportunity to meet him at one point, I believe.
I did last year at a 50th anniversary celebration of Space 1999 in London.
Right.
Johnny Garco came over from Italy to be part of that. He's been part of virtual conventions as well, put on by the same group, Space 1999 fans. Really, really lovely guy. Just really enthusiastic about the experience of getting to travel to Pinewood Studios. He talks about seeing Oscars on display in the lobby. There's a display, or used to be a display, of David Lean's Oscar and Laurence Olivier's Oscar, I think, for Hamlet, I want to say, is the film that he talks about.
Well be.
Yeah. So just a lovely guy who really enjoyed that experience, and a great actor as well. I think he really does a fantastic job in this episode. One of the things that he would be the first to bring up is that his English was far from perfect, and he actually mentioned that in the audition with Sylvia Anderson. She wasn't concerned about it, which is really interesting given the history that the Andersons have with dubbing.
Yes,
Concern
very
over
true.
accents.
Well, so that's one of the interesting things about that whole first season is they were obliged to use Italian actors because of the co-financing deal that they had going on, and
Yeah.
that produces some interesting results. But I think it's fair to say that this is one of the more successful attempts at getting an Italian actor in who, as you say, English not so good, but still gives a fantastic performance, and
Excellent.
you wouldn't know that he was struggling at all. I think it works absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, and it's I'm glad you brought up the Italian co-partnership, because the show, the first year of Space 1999, I think just the first year, was co-financed by the Italian network RAI. And part of that deal was that they were supposed to have a lot of Italian guest stars, and the character of Alan Carter, the Eagle pilot, one of the most popular characters from the show, was originally supposed to be Italian. The Italian actor who was going to play the part fell through, and Nick Tate had really made a strong impression on Jerry and Sylvia, and so was cast. And the rest is history. Fans love him. He's a fan favorite character. Nick Tate.
Well, he doesn't fare too well in this particular episode. That should be
which is really interesting, because the way Nick Tate tells the story, and I'm going to try to do justice to his telling of events here.
Okay.
Is that this episode was originally written for him, was supposed to be a Nick Tate, Alan Carter story.
Oh, right.
So Alan Carter was supposed to be one who had an encounter with the monster in the past. Now he goes back and faces the monster and has to, have a confrontation with it in the spaceship graveyard. All of that, he claims, was originally written for him. I don't know that that's ever been confirmed by anyone else. It's certainly plausible that it was written for him.
Apart from the way the episode ends, that wouldn't work. They would have to change that.
No,
but otherwise,
the ending would change.
Otherwise, I can see that fitting. I'd love to see it. I
would love to see
that.
Yeah, Alan Carter, of course, and most of the supporting cast don't really get a chance to shine. And Nick blames, I think this is fair to say, I'm trying to be as even-handed as possible, because there's a lot of conflict and opinions about this. So I'm going to try to summarize Nick's view of it, and forgive me, any Space 1999 fans who know differently or can prove differently.
Yeah,
I know you're out there. I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. The way Nick tells the story is that Martin Landau, being the leading man of the show, wasn't keen on having supporting characters elevated to a main character role in an episode, which is why they preferred to have a guest character come in, do their bit, and then leave. So it wasn't seen as competition with the leading characters.
Right.
And that's very consistent with what would have been expected in American television at the time. There was a lot of a practice called line counting going on in American television in the late 60s, early 70s, where lead actors would actually count how many lines they had to make sure that they had the most lines. So things in hindsight that seemed very petty, but at the time was just kind of the political situation of trying to
there's another way of looking at that, which is, well, you're being paid to be the lead actor in the show. You're, for promotional purposes and for your personal brand as an actor, you're there to be the lead actor. So you don't want the writers doing sneaky things and, accidentally forgetting to write you into an episode.
Well, that's it. And Martin Landau and Barbara Bain, from their point of view, were at the peak of their stardom at that time. They hadn't gone any higher, certainly, than they had at the end of Mission Impossible at that time in their careers. So they're on top of their game, and they leave it all behind to move to England for a year.
Huge gamble.
A massive commitment. So for them to want to exercise some creative control and to have, be very careful about how their brand was represented is totally good
Yeah.
business. Makes great sense.
Yeah. But doesn't
yeah,
necessarily chime with the British way of making films at that time, which was much more based on the theatrical history of, you know, an ensemble cast, you know, everyone just mucking in to do the work, and you know that whole kind of background. So yeah, it's interesting how those two approaches clash, but it makes for a unique show as a result. The fact that you blend all these ingredients together makes for a really interesting show. And I do think it's good. I'm glad that Dragon's Domain, in a way, is kind of an outlier in that
yes,
the guest character gets to have that leading role, but the whole story is still framed from the perspective of how did Koenig and Helena deal with this problem of, you know, Tony making these claims about this monster, and you know the whole thing is still framed through John Koenig's eyes at the end of the day. So he's still the one in charge, he's still the boss, he's still the leading man, but we can tell a different type of story.
Spoiler alert ahead, he also is the one who kills the monster in the end, which is a significant significant choice.
Yes. Well, so the interesting thing about this whole episode is its structure. It's the fact that half of it is told in flashback, and it gives Space 1999 fans the opportunity to see a slice of life before the moon was blasted out of orbit. Would you say that that's one of the other aspects that makes this episode important for fans?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It gives it a sense of being a larger world, to have that, and to have some background for Koenig, to see him before he was in this role of commander, before he gets his promotion, to see him kind of with his back to the wall, going to bat for somebody the way that he does for Cellini in this episode. Really, really good character development. Really good stuff with Bergman as well. Always love a bit of Bergman. Good to see him in a different context. There's a bit of an Easter egg there for Bond fans. The set that they use for the commissioner's office is a James Bond set. See if you can, if you're a Bond fan, see if you can spot the one.
It's not exactly subtle, is it?
No, it's a very recognizable set.
Yeah, it is. Even I'm by no means a Bond expert. Immediately saw that set and went, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
For one thing, it doesn't fit with Keith Wilson's design aesthetic whatsoever. No. It's a completely different type of setting. But again, that's what makes this episode feel so fresh and different, is because it takes you to places that you wouldn't normally go, like Commissioner Dixon's office. It's a very unusual scene for Space 1999 to do, and as I say, I'm glad it's an outlier. I wouldn't want every episode to be like that, but I think for a one-off event, I think that's great. I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. If every episode was like that, it would be UFO, wouldn't it? Because you'd be dealing with, you know, power struggles between the commissioner of a space program.
Yeah. Which is that, you see, this is the problem, and probably because I like that sort of stuff. I find that really juicy and interesting. I always enjoyed the character of Commissioner Simmons from the beginning of the series, because I liked that power struggle that was going on. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, once you get into Space 1999 proper, this is a problem for me. It's not going to be a problem for everyone, but there comes a point where it's like, Commander Koenig is Commander Koenig. He's the one in charge. We follow his orders no matter what, even when, as they started to play with in certain episodes, his orders are a little bit up for some debate. You still always know at the back of your mind, well, yeah, but he's the hero. He's the one in charge. He's always going to be correct about all of this. Whereas I like the power struggle that goes on. And I know that's a particular Jerry Anderson theme as well, which, you know, is very present in Doppelganger, very present in UFO. even the Thunderbirds I'll Go feature film has people sat round a table arguing about what the right thing to do is. There isn't necessarily as much of that going on in Space 1999.
Not
Although I
normally.
could be wrong about that. Yeah, not
normally.
normally. Yeah. So that's kind of an important part. But yeah, going back to the world building that goes on in this episode. Yeah, that's what, again, I think distinguishes Space 1999 certainly from some of the other, I suppose, the ITC filmed live action series that were going on at that time. Is you have a real sense of, really through this episode and only a few others, of like, this is how the universe of Space 1999 functions. Like, we have the Space Commission sending people up on missions, and it's kind of like space travel is clearly something that they are comfortable with, but they're having to deal with it still being a relatively new thing, still experimental, still kind of uncertain, that they're still doing things for the first time. And I really like that it's not all like, we're launching a rocket, hooray, it's all great, everything's going to go super duper well for us, like kind of like Fireball XL5 type energy, where isn't space travel just a big fun game? This is much more like, no, it's dangerous and stuff will go wrong, and when it goes wrong, it's expensive and embarrassing and it's a real problem. I really do like that aspect of the show. And yeah, it's great that you have episodes like Dragon's Domain that are able to explore and unpack the meanings behind all of that as it kind of goes along. So that's a real highlight.
Definite sign of a shift in the times, where after the winning of the space race and putting a man on the moon, you have something like Apollo 13, and then there's kind of questions of like, should we even be doing this? Are we spending too much money on the space program? And all of that kind of tension of the 70s about what was going to happen in the world with space exploration is felt in these scenes where the whole world hears Cellini's story, and there's all these questions of impropriety and did he act correct and did he do the right thing, and it potentially could scuttle the whole program of space exploration entirely, which is, the stakes couldn't be higher. So it's a big weighty thing to deal with, and very timely for that time.
Absolutely. And I like the way the episode kind of ramps up to that. As I say, the structure of this is very interesting. So let's go to the beginning of the episode, where it starts with Helena delivering a monologue, which feels very, very year two. There are a lot of things about this episode that kind of feel like we're setting up for the changes that are coming in year two, actually. The first of which is, Helena starting with a monologue explaining that it's the 877th day since the moon left Earth orbit, and she's basically talking about what's going on, kind of captain's log type of situation. And Tony Cellini is asleep in his room, and he is disturbed by what I can only describe as sparkly Christmas tinsel in a washing up bowl spinning around.
I always saw it as blades.
Blades. Oh,
yeah, I always saw it as blades, but I watched it on a 2.5-inch DVD, portable DVD.
You weren't getting any definition out of that image whatsoever. No, I suppose not. But what accompanies that visual, which I do think is effective, is the sort of big howling noise that you can't quite pinpoint what kind of a noise it is. It kind of sounds like an animal. It sounds like a wind, a big rushing, roaring sort of noise. It's difficult to pin down exactly what it is. And you get that sort of, there's also that sort of high-pitched siren noise type sound going with it as well. So it's like slightly technological as well in the way it comes across. So it's this big kind of weird abstract thing that you can't quite pin down exactly what it is, but it's menacing and it's not a good thing. And the way Tony reacts to that. The thing I found quite funny about that whole scene is Tony's taste in artwork and decoration He's gone for an African tribal theme with the way he decorates his living quarters.
Yes, there's a motif that runs through this episode. Um, it's based on a myth, a dragon killing myth. I'm blanking on the name of the saint.
George.
Saint George.
Yeah.
Saint George and the Dragon.
Can tell you live in Scotland.
Yeah, very famous story. But instead of a sword, he tends to go for the axe, and I think I don't quite know what that means or why that's, he keeps an axe in his room. It's an axe that he used in the original incident.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if it's purely a practical thing of, there would be no practical reason for them to have a sword on board the Ultra Probe.
True, but practically speaking, why would you have an axe either?
I mean, in a survival situation, you need to chop wood, possibly.
Sure.
I can see ever so slightly more practical use for having an axe over
Absolutely.
a sword.
There's definitely more so than a sword, but it's kind of an interesting motif because it has more like, I don't know, ancient connotations or like primal connotations, I guess. And it's interesting that it follows him wherever he goes. He always has an axe with him.
Yes.
So really interesting imagery there.
Yeah, I suppose, again, because we don't know when it comes to the monster itself, we don't know how old it is, where it came from, how long it's been existent, how long it will continue to exist, all that sort of stuff. So I guess giving the episode a few sort of timeless qualities, particularly as in terms of the structure of the episode, we are playing with time a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a neat little idea to have sort of weaponry and artwork and things like that are not of 1999, I suppose. I guess that's the key thing there. Yeah. Meanwhile, Kano turns up only for that opening scene, but he's playing chess with Commander Koenig, which feels like a setup for something thematically relevant to the episode, but I don't see it. I don't see that going anywhere.
I take that more as a character moment for Kano because he's the computer expert and he's always he sort of has a bit of a battle of wills with Commander Koenig about how much of a role the computer should play in their lives.
Yeah.
It sort of runs through the series.
I just think that's interesting. It's good that it runs through the series, but I don't think it's relevant to this episode particularly, unless you can find a link there that I can't.
Nothing springs to mind. It's not a particularly strategic episode.
No.
It's definitely more driven by emotions and concepts rather than strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Meanwhile, Tony has decided he wants Tony Cellini, I should say, because I'm easily going to get mixed up with Tony Vedesci for the next season.
Yeah, don't
Tony
do that.
Cellini decides he's going to go and take an eagle because, of course, he is. We need to get eagles into this episode somehow. And in order to do that, he knocks out Alan, our beloved Alan Carter. And
now this is like,
naughty boy. That doesn't make me like you as a character whatsoever.
This is funny for two reasons. One is, of course, Nick Tate believes that the part that Cellini's playing was written for him. So if it was in fact written for him, then it's like he's basically, not only did he lose the part, but he's getting knocked out a couple of times by this guy. Yeah. But also because, and this is confirmed by Johnny Garco as well, Nick Tate was the one who helped him learn his English lines. So he recorded all of Cellini's lines for him on audio tape to give him the pronunciation, to help him basically master the English language pronunciation.
I was wondering how he went about that, because it sounds like he's been speaking English for years. Like, it really is there, but I could sense, like, okay, he's probably really sat down and learned these words, like put a lot of extra effort into making sure he gets it all right. Particularly when you're in a sci-fi show, you've got to deal with all sorts of weird, wonderful terminology. So I have to, hats off to him for putting that
hats off to to Nick Tate for being a team player and really putting in the effort to make this episode work, because it's hard to be knocked out twice by the same character in the same episode and make it a believable occurrence.
Yeah, well, I like the fact that they make a joke out of it later on as well.
Do.
Like, he does say, "What's this guy got against me?" Which is great. It's just like that's perfect. Like, that's how Alan Carter would react to that situation.
It is, and it totally makes the whole thing okay. If it had just been, a Star Trek episode and there was a red shirt, I would have rolled my eyes. But because it was a character-driven thing for Alan, they totally make it work, which is great.
Yeah. So anyway, Tony is not successful in stealing his eagle. Koenig manages to apprehend him, and then it leads into a conversation in the medical unit where basically Helena and John catch each other up on things that they already know about the Ultra Probe mission and what happened to Tony Cellini in the first place, but very useful for the audience to hear all of that information.
Yes.
It's done fairly naturally, though, I think. Like, as exposition goes, it's not too bad.
I will jump in here and seize this opportunity to say that this is a great episode for Helena.
Yes.
A character who they really struggled to find in the beginning. She's sort of in Breakaway. She's so small with her performance. It's such a subtle work that it's almost not there. And that was a common criticism of the show, was that it was wooden. That a lot of the acting was wooden because of the Puppetry Association. Critics would say that. And a lot of that criticism was leveled at her. And I think by the time you get to this episode, she's really started to find more of what she's doing with that character.
Yeah.
And so it's really, she's not my favorite character by any means, but I like what she does in this episode, and was pleasantly surprised on rewatching it this time to see the work that she was doing, and to see that there was more layers there, more kind of inner conflict on display. So it's a really much better performance than I had recollected.
Yeah. No, great. Yeah, I mean, I like the subtlety of her early performances as well, but the scripts don't sort of back that up. I think there's what's actually starts to happen towards the end of year one is that it's meshing together a little bit more now. They're giving her things to do that enabled her to expand on that range.
Well, they're allowing her to play subtext, aren't they?
Yeah,
like they're giving her subtext to play, and therefore it's not just a blank slate.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Exactly. That's exactly it. But yeah, and then we essentially come to the conflict of the episode, which is Helena wants to write off Cellini as just mentally unstable, can't believe a word he says. We just have to ignore this guy and make sure he's safe, but basically ignore him. Whereas Koenig is like, no, I remember what this guy was like before the Ultra Probe incident. I remember him. There's something else going on here. There's more to it. We have to take him seriously. We have to believe in his credibility, which therefore triggers the flashback of like, well, what did go on? What happened? Let's go back to the year 1996. It's not nearly that dramatic. It just suddenly...
No, it's just suddenly 1996. And you're like, whoa, what happened to the uniforms? They're all different. Yeah, and
they're a bit different. They're not that different.
No. I mean, different characters wear different uniforms.
Yeah.
So
basically, there's a new... Bergman has discovered a planet, because of course he has. He's always doing that sort of thing, our Victor Bergman. He's discovered the planet Ultra, and they're launching a ship to go and explore, and Koenig and Cellini still haven't decided who's going to be in charge of it yet, even though it seems like quite a big, important thing to have figured out. But I like that it's kind of played down like that. It's like everyone else is treating it really, really seriously, and like it's the most important decision they could possibly make.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, these two guys are so comfortable in each other's company and so confident in their own abilities that
Yeah.
in the end they can flip a coin and doesn't really matter who ends up in charge of it.
They sort of
Even
treat it
though-
like they're two football stars, and they're trying to like flip a coin to see who's going to lead the match.
Yeah, but it's great because later on, obviously, that decision is called into question, and
Sure.
it's there's people who say, "Oh, Koenig should have been the one in charge of it because he was better equipped to handle the
Mhm.
situations and stuff like that." And the whole point is, no, what really happened was down to bad luck, and therefore we need a bit of luck to play into who got chosen for that role in the first place. So I think that's really, really neat and a really great way of establishing just what the rules are for us as
Yeah.
an audience and how this is going to kind of play out.
Well,
So,
and
yeah.
setting up my hobby horse here is like Cellini losing the coin toss. Sort of like, well, was he fated to meet this monster from the beginning? Did it have it in for him,
Yeah.
all the way back?
Ooh, I
all the way
like
to
that
the end.
theory. I do like that theory. That's
Say,
great. You
hard to say.
yeah, you're saying that this monster had powers beyond just standing
Well,
in a doorway looking scary.
possibly there's sort of a mythical like Green Knight story about it, where they have like an appointment with each other.
Mm,
You really do feel that energy right
yes.
right from the beginning with Cellini waking up in his quarters.
Yeah.
You feel that kind of like this is sort of an inevitability, and despite everything that Koenig can do and everything that the Alphans do to try to stop it from ending the way that it does, it sort of moves inexorably towards its conclusion, which is
Yeah.
that final battle. And that's, as an audience, that's something that we really enjoy. It's that kind of suspense of like knowing what's going to happen, watching the characters trying to fight it and seeing the creative ways that they find to try to fight it. And then in the end, having that final showdown that we wanted all along.
It's great.
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, that's absolutely perfect. So basically, Tony's in charge of the mission, and we get a brief glimpse of the interplanetary space station, which we saw destroyed in Breakaway. That makes a kind of reappearance. It's just kind of an interesting, considering it's so far down the line in the production order of the series. It's kind of interesting to go back to that pre-Breakaway world where things are tense but basically okay. There's definitely a tension that underpins the whole thing, as we talked about with the politics that are at play and the power struggle and things like that. So that's all kind of there, but everything's still quite nice. It feels very heroic and important and special when Tony and his crew go off on the mission. Anything much to say about the crew of the Ultra Probe?
Nothing in particular. It's a nice assembly. There's nothing kind of exceptional
Right
about the way that they set it up. That there's two women on the mission, which is great.
Yep.
2 women and 2 men. But the women do things like serve coffee, which feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. They could have been doing some more scientific things.
And that whole part of the mission where everything's going quite well is all kind of covered in narration by Helena. We don't actually really see it take place. And I'm thinking it would have been nice if more of the episode could have been dedicated, sort of like, appropriately enough, a bit like The Day After Tomorrow into Infinity. We need to spend a bit more time with the crew having a nice time. And of course, the whole time I was watching this, speaking of Into Infinity, I was going, that's the set of the Alteris.
It is, yeah. And you would know that from having reviewed The Day After Tomorrow Into Infinity on the Security Hazard blog, which if you haven't read Jack's review of that, you definitely should.
It's funny, really. I haven't spent much time talking about Space 1999, but I have gone into a lot of detail on Into Infinity.
You have, so you would have recognized all that immediately. The thing that stands out to me, and it's partially the classical music, the sort of gentle lyricalness of it.
I like it. I really like it.
I really like it too. It's reminiscent of the way they approach this whole Ultra Probe journey, is reminiscent of Doppelganger and the astronaut's journey from one planet to another, and that being both of those being reminiscent of space 2001: A Space Odyssey, which has a lot of very kind of slow and lyrical journeys through space, where it's kind of like poetic imagery, a poetic version of space travel.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Ultra Probe itself, though, Jack? What do you think of the design and the model?
I don't have much to say about it, and this is probably one of my other criticisms with Space 1999. The thing that's probably going to get me get me lynched by all the fans is I like the eagle. I like the aesthetic. I like the modular nature of. I think it's clever. I just don't think it's interesting. So to me, I look at the Ultra Probe and I go, "Yep, that's a Space 1999 ship."
Perhaps it's a bit too practical. I really have
to say about it.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it's far too practical. I like my ships big and green and unnecessarily visual. Whereas I like the Eagle. I think it's practical and sensible and clever. As I say, I think it's a clever design, but I don't necessarily think it's the most.
Well, it's more of a pickup truck, where it's sort of the sort of thing that you could imagine having being sort of highly utilitarian and something you could do yourself.
Yeah. And that fits the series. That's why I'm like, it's not a bad design. It performs its function perfectly. Yeah. And it does also happen to look nice. I'm not saying it looks bad. I'm just saying it doesn't stun me and wow me. So yeah, when it comes to the Ultra Probe, it's basically, I mean, I can only honestly, when I picture it in my head, I can only remember what the front of it looks like, and that's because it's basically an eagle. So, but that's the look, that's the feel they were going for, where it's like space travel is quite new, and we just kind of have to strip it down to, function, and it has to be utilitarian, basically. So that's how I look at it, anyway.
I'm really fond of it. Naturally, I like that it's more of a widescreen, like it's a very long ship, which is kind of unusual. In they tend to design the ships around the shape of the frame. So in television, they tend to be a little bit more squashed, so you can fit the whole thing in there. And I love the way that it feels like it just keeps going as it passes through the frame.
But also, I think that is important when you come to the monster attack later on, because one of the things that sticks out as like what I think helps why this is a nightmare for so many children of the 1970s is there's that feeling that the monster is at a distance. It's far away. It's right down the other end of the ship. So the fact that the Ultra Probe is such a long design, it helps to fit that image of the monster is over there. It's like if you were asleep in bed at night and you had a wardrobe at the other end of your bedroom, all the way over there, far away as possible at the other end of the room.
Yeah,
that is going to trigger a nightmare for you. So I think that's having that distance between the people and the safety of the control cabin at the front and the door at the back where the monster comes through, I think is a really clever bit of visual work there that is what makes it so memorable.
It's just out of sight. It's just out of reach.
Exactly.
It's just on the edge of your consciousness. Love that.
And it works for the benefit of the practical monster itself, which once you get up close to it, doesn't necessarily work as well. So the fact that it's kept at a distance for a really long time, I think is important. I mean, we've skipped over a bit there where we get to the spaceship graveyard.
Let's go back to that real quick. So they are on course for this planet Ultra, and they discovered something, and Cellini kind of makes his sort of fatal error as a commander here, where he gets sidetracked by this other discovery. Do you find that to be like a fatal flaw, or do you find that to be more of
I think it makes sense. I mean, from a storytelling perspective, of course he's going to go and investigate the interesting thing that's kind of appeared there. So
was it part of the parameters of his mission, or did he go too far?
No, I don't think so. If I think about it, if we're looking at Koenig as like, a Koenig's the
yes.
ideal heroic version of what a commander and a leader should be, I'm like, well,
Uh-huh.
of course, John Koenig would go and investigate that as well. Like, that's
That's
just
very true.
he might have found a way of delegating the tasks, possibly, so that maybe some people went to investigate while other people got on with the mission. But then again, there's only 4 people in the room, so. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that makes sense. He went to investigate that.
That's an interesting idea, though. I wonder if they could have split the Ultra Probe and sent the kind of lifeboat to investigate while the main module carried on to Ultra, and then they rendezvous later.
Yeah, maybe.
Interesting
I also
possibility.
what I do like about it, and it's a theme throughout the rest of that, is those spaceships represent an opportunity. Of their alien spaceships, they've got a technology that's advanced of what Earth is currently capable of, and they could use insight from those ships to strengthen the Earth space program, which I
Right.
think is a really interesting way of looking at it. And it's what kind of Koenig tries to use that as a bargaining chip later on, and it doesn't work, but it's an interesting way of looking at it, of like, how can we use this disaster to our advantage? So yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm extremely fond of spaceship graveyards. It's a motif
It's a
that
cool
pops up.
visual.
Yeah, it's a cool visual. It's a motif that pops up in one of my favorite shows you've probably never heard of. It's called Starfleet.
You mentioned it a few times, that's for sure. Yeah.
Have I mentioned I'm a big fan of Starfleet? No,
Yeah,
Starfleet has a spaceship graveyard. There's a few in Star Trek, and there's actually another one that pops up later in Space 1999 as well. So it's a well-worn motif for a good reason. I think it's an impressive visual, and in this particular case, is carried off with a lot of mystery and a lot of menace.
Yes. It's a shame in a way. I mean, it would have splintered the story in too many parts, but obviously we don't explore any of those ships. They don't even get off the Ultra Probe.
No.
Which, it's kind of a shame that we don't get more of that, but then again, it sets up a mystery for us later on that works well. So yeah, no, I think all that is handled the right way by the characters, and it's not until the monster kind of appears, and it does just appear. That's the fantastic thing about it. And yeah, all right, let's get into the monster attack, because
let's talk about the monster.
That's the key feature of this whole episode, is the monster attack. The very static nature of it, I can obviously only look at it as, well, they stuck a monster in a door and they waved its tentacles around, and there's the cavity. I'm not even going to call it a mouth. There's a space underneath, and that's where I was going to say that's where you get sucked off, but we're not going to. You get sucked through that hole, and now this is the scary bit. It just strips people of life. It just totally, sucks all the life out of them and spits them out again in a very sort of cold, mechanical, efficient way, which I like. That bit's scary when people go through that hatch, that opening, whatever you want to call it, and they spit back through. That's where I'm like, okay, now I see it. That's the nightmare fuel.
Yeah. There's sort of on the opposite side in a way. Partially, I think, because I'm so interested in puppetry. There's a puppetry element to this monster, which I really am fond of. But there's also a kind of like a disharmony, a disjointedness about it. As you say, it's very stationary. It feels kind of like it was designed and built by Keith Wilson, so it feels more like a set in some ways, a set piece.
Yeah, it does.
Where it's stuck into the door.
Yeah,
it's quite theatrical. in that it doesn't have like, other than its tentacles, which are on strings, it doesn't really move into the room much. It doesn't move much on its own outside of those. And those are quite like conventional monster, but then it has that kind of like fixture feeling about it. But also it has this kind of like spiritual, mystical aspect where it seems like it can hypnotize people. It creates a lot of sounds, a lot of wind effects, this kind of like, so it's very eerie. All those elements, they don't quite fit together. None of it of like clicks together, and that kind of like dissonance of it makes it really disturbing.
And it feeds into the whole thing of where they talk about later when they're looking at the black box recording and they're like, well, it didn't register as a life form. And then right at the end of the episode, Helena questions whether the thing was, is it dead because it was never really alive? And you look at it and you're like, yeah, it's kind of alive, but also not, because it's a totally static object. Well, not totally static, it has the tentacles, but like it's an immovable force. And in that way, you go, wow, that's actually really, that makes it a really strong, it's scary and menacing because it's a part of the set, because it's like, it's as permanent as that wall is in a way. And I think that is different, very different compared to what it could have been, which is like a guy in a rubber suit, you know, lolloping around and menacing everyone in that way. I think because it is, because it is static and has just a presence all of its own. And as I mentioned, you know, the fact it's at a distance and it, you know, you can't get close to it and all this sort of stuff. It's just something different. It's very, very different. And in that way, it is striking.
I think a lot about the kind of like folk horror stuff that was going on around that time. Things like Doctor Who did the Stones of Blood, which has these kind of like living stone creatures, the kind of like Children of the Stones, the Wicker Man, all these kinds of like spooky like pagan imagery that's kind of in there. But also there's kind of like, because the monster has these like multiple different aspects, it has sort of an unholy Christian antichrist feeling where it's like it's its own unholy trinity. It's got its spirit and its like physical element that grabs you, but also like a horrible like father part of it that's like going to devour you and spit out your smoldering corpse. It's a very disturbing concept, like as a whole. You know, but to your point, some of the elements, and I think, you know, Jerry Anderson has said this in the commentary track that I listened to. Johnny Byrne has talked about this. Other people who were involved with the program have talked about some of the failures of the monster, and they are definitely very real. So I definitely can concede that it's not perfect, but yeah, a very disturbing and unusual scene to see in a Jerry Anderson show. I think that the level of intensity,
the level of terror. I think that's the other thing is the guest, those cast members who get sucked off by the monster.
Stop saying
that. Sorry, I will stop saying that. They are the ones who sell it as well, by the amount of screaming and just hysterics they get into. It's and you said this yourself, it's a very emotional episode in general. So a lot of the terror comes from the way it's reacted to. And as you say, there is this sort of antichrist, like, this is the worst possible thing that could happen. This is the end of days kind of feeling to it, which I just think absolutely, it is a big part of what sells it so well.
It's what cements it in the memory of people like Guillermo del Toro, who's tweeted at the Jerry Anderson account about this episode. So it's a memorable thing that's made a big impact for sure.
Definitely. So the crew all get taken away and their life force just extracted from them. Tony manages to escape in the control cabin, the kind of the front end of the Ultra Probe, launches off, leaves the monster, leaves the rest of the Ultra Probe behind. And there is a sense of sort of even though he's succeeded in the sense that he has lived, there is just a huge, overwhelming sense of doom and failure, and almost like he's suffering a fate worse than death, in that he's now stuck alone for 6 months with his own company and nothing else, just trying to get home and get back to Earth. And of course, the awful humiliation that kind of awaits him when he gets back there. And I like the way that's explored as well, because it starts with them saying, oh yeah, he came back to Moonbase Alpha, and he was a hero because he survived and he made it back. But then doubt starts to creep in, and it's not like an immediate sort of scandal or anything like that. It's something that slowly starts to creep into it as they start to look at the black box and start to question a little bit of what Tony is saying and things like that. It's all very like, we're just starting to, and I think in that way, the disaster really, what the real disaster is the questioning of Tony, and the slow disintegration of his credibility and of the attack on his character is really great. That doom laden feeling of the whole thing kind of comes about there.
And you get the sense that
really
it reflects that kind of external doubt might reflect some sort of internal self-doubt. It sort of pairs with that feeling that he must have had, and it's never really discussed too much in the episode, I don't think.
No.
Him like, he was leader of this mission and he lost his entire crew. He's in a way responsible for their deaths, and you see him, in this capsule after he pulls off his brilliant maneuver. I love how everyone talks about what a brilliant piloting job he does, but then he has to spend 6 months alone in space. And he's there's a lovely bit where he doesn't even want to eat his survival rations. I mean, this guy is like wrestling with this experience this trauma that he's been through.
Yeah.
And then to have that, kind of reflected with, then he gets back and nobody believes him.
Awful,
then we get,
awful ordeal to go through.
Awful thing. And then
well, then he's in hospital and we meet a young Helena. And you can tell she's young because she's got a different hairdo to what she normally has. And I was distracted by that the whole time I was watching that scene. It's like, oh, look at you. You've got a different hairstyle. Look at you.
Is that disturbing to see? She always has the same hairstyle pretty much.
Yeah. I don't know if disturbing is the right word, but it is very much like, this is a flashback. Oh, right. Okay. And it's great because what you're doing there, that whole scene is what's interesting about that is because Helena becomes sort of the villain, because obviously we know that Tony experienced the monster. We saw it happen. So the fact that she is very coy and aloof about it to start with, and she's kind of trying to joke around and trying to make light of the whole thing of, all right, well, what do you want to talk about, Tony? It's all very irritating in a way, which is great because you can see how Tony therefore gets needled in that way. And it's like, no, you're misinterpreting, you're misunderstanding what he's saying, and you're not believing him. And all of this stuff is kind of, it just makes for great drama, great tension there. And the fact it's coming from Helena, who is normally the voice of reason in these situations, and she's the one who is normally curious and wants to know more and is asking all the right questions. In this situation, she's younger and therefore doesn't have that life experience yet to, maybe start to believe. All she has is her facts and her medical knowledge and a little bit of intuition there as well that's telling her, monsters don't exist. This man is ranting and raving. Why should I believe him? And what's great about that as well is the way that Gianni Garco plays it as well, where he really goes for it in terms of his passion for trying to be believed is great.
Yes, and he does it in such a way. There's a big trope in television in general of these kinds of Captain Ahab type characters who have, you know, been driven to the brink of madness by their
Right.
kind of encounter with the great white whale or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he plays it so well where it's you can see how people around him think that he's mad, that he's a lunatic.
But he's in control.
He himself, yes, it's a very controlled kind of rage, a very specific kind of fury. It's a really great performance that has a lot of layers to it. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's great. And it doesn't make him into the bad guy either, because he's not attacking Helena in that moment.
No.
He is attacking the whole system that has kind of been structured against him, against. No, his instructions are clear. It's like, you have to defy reason and all of this sort of stuff. He's like, no, not that any individual is wrong. It's the structure of the way we think about problems like this is wrong, and that's what we have to call into question here. And I think that's just clever, because it means he's not the villain there. He's
and
still
it's
the hero.
Back to that theme of fate. He's sort of like been drawn by this experience into going against the grain of his whole species, of the whole human race. And the way that we look at things and the way that we solve problems. And now he's structured a different way, and he has to come back to this society that's all facing the other way and go against that.
Yeah.
Without condemning them for doing it. Right.
Yep.
Except for Koenig, who
Koenig's the one person who gets it.
Except because of their like towel snapping behind like locker room relationship, he's convinced that this guy, he's one of the good boys. He's one of the good ones. He could never do wrong. He could never be mistaken. Which sort of goes too far in a way. I think.
Little bit. There is a little bit of like, Koenig, why do you believe him quite so forcibly? I mean, you're right to, but maybe lacking a little bit there.
There's a great Martin Landau performance to contrast with this one is Collision Course, where him and Alan both have kind of a vision of what's about to happen to Moonbase Alpha. And they're the only ones who know what's about to happen. Everybody else thinks that they're crazy. Yeah. And his performance in that episode has a lot more of the kind of stuff that I wish I could have seen in this episode, where he's might have been struggling with a little bit more doubt about whether or not Cellini was really, what really happened to Cellini, where it could have easily have been wrong. Yeah, the whole thing could have been a hallucination or
it
whatever.
Maybe needed a bit more of a conversation between those two characters.
Yeah,
but you do get a little bit of that later on once it's flash forward again, and we're skipping ahead. That when they do have that conversation in the medical center, and Koenig and Helena question him along more level-headed kind of lines. That plays quite nicely, but by then it's a bit kind of too late. It's like Koenig's already committed, so it's fine. But yeah, we get to that scene in Commissioner Dixon's office, and it's played very much one note, where Dixon, as soon as the scene starts, well, Dixon's going to be against whatever we want as an audience to happen. He is just the antagonist in that situation. There's no convincing him one way or the other. And for me, that scene goes on a little bit too long, just a little bit too long. I like it. I like that they're having these conversations about, well, how is the public going to react to us launching another Ultra Probe mission? Or, how are we supposed to interpret what Cellini is saying? And all of this sort of stuff is great. And it feels it's a good little antidote to what we normally see in Space 1999. But yeah, just a little bit too long for me. Yeah. I also don't like the fact that Bergman gets kind of lumped in as like the, when Dixon makes his decision at the end to relieve Koenig and Bergman of their posts and to send Cellini off for further mental recuperation. I don't like that Bergman gets lumped in, because Bergman seems to be trying to be logical about this, and is also kind of like, I don't really believe Cellini. I mean, maybe I don't doubt him quite as much as everyone else is, but I still, I'm trying to look at this from a scientific point of view, and based on
Yeah.
what the evidence says. You know, so I don't really understand why Dixon takes a disliking to Bergman so much, because it's Victor Bergman. We love Victor Bergman.
Yeah, Victor's sort of the warm heart of the show. So anybody who does anything bad to Victor, we immediately hate as an audience. It's like a kicking a puppy kind of moment.
Yeah, and then I'm also just distracted by the fact that Koenig's orange jacket doesn't fit him properly. Looks far too small for him.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you. I do think the scene runs a little bit too long, and there's always a temptation when you're doing philosophical material, or if you're doing like a big historical thing, to get sidetracked by the themes and the stuff that you're talking about, and lose sight of the kind of entertainment factor, like remembering that you're telling an entertaining story. And I think they do in this scene. They're getting so invested in the world building and the kind of like the history of it that they sort of lose track of the narrative for a second, but then they pick it back up and it carries on just fine.
Yes. Well, then we sort of flash back forward to present day Moonbase Alpha, where is it ever explained why Tony Cellini ends up back on Moonbase Alpha?
I don't think so.
Obviously, we only see him in this episode, so there's no extra backstory there. But for whatever reason, he was among the 311 Alphans that got blown out of orbit, and I like how that's recapped a little bit. Like, oh, and then by the way, we got thrown out of orbit, so that's how that progressed. And then to kind of bring us back into the world of Koenig and Helena as they are now, we get that scene where Koenig comes to apologize for getting a bit shouty, getting a bit, aggro, by bringing in a flower to apologize to Helena. And it's very Year 2 again. It sets up the type of relationship that they have in Year 2, which I find particularly Martin Landau, I don't think plays that very well. Even though it's his wife he's acting with, I actually don't feel the chemistry between them. I know a lot of people say they have great chemistry. I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's just interesting because it's so hard to see Space Knight. Of course, there were other actors who were considered for the part before Martin Landau, and one of them was Robert Culp, is sort of one of the main frontrunners besides Martin Landau. And it's interesting to kind of consider. It's hard to subtract. He's one of those actors who's so synonymous with the role in a way.
Yeah,
it's difficult to subtract him from the equation and put someone else there to see what the chemistry would have been like. In some ways, it's like, well, Martin Landau is a character actor. Those are the roles that everybody remembers him for. Things like Ed Wood and North by Northwest.
So good in that. Yeah,
I mean, he's really good in these movies, and when he's playing those parts, he's playing really interesting kind of off the beaten path kind of characters, and he has that kind of like face where he's a very memorable face, and so he always plays those types of characters really well. Yeah. And then in the 70s, after Mission Impossible, he becomes sort of a leading man type, and he's sort of unorthodox for a leading man because he's more, feel like his skills are more in the character acting realm.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's great as Koenig for the most part. It's just there are just clearly certain bits of acting that he's less comfortable with. And it strikes me, at least, that one of the things he's least comfortable with is being a nice, affectionate partner to his wife's character. Just for some, which is weird because it was something that he was pushing for, and the Landaus were pushing for into Year 2. Was let's have a bit more warmth, let's have a bit more heart to that.
And maybe they were pushing towards that because they sensed that it was a bit more challenging.
Maybe that's it. They just felt that the show needed it, and regardless of whether they could actually do it or not. But yeah,
I do agree.
That's my observation on it.
Yeah, I agree with your observation. I think it's well founded. I will say that I think that this scene plays much better as like a template for year 2. This episode is way better than what they actually do in year 2 for the most part.
They take it way too far in year 2. This is just restrained enough.
his bit where he's joking about the guys in hydroponics helping him, but I do deserve some credit. You know, it has there's a bit of like naturalness there to it, even though it is a bit stilted, as you say.
It's probably because I know
not there in year 2.
Because I know that that's where they're heading in year 2. I think that partly ruins it for me. It's like, maybe if you had just kept it to that level, it would have been fine. But no, you go way too lovey-dovey, way too sickly sweet with it in year 2. So I go into it with that awareness that that's what's coming along. Speaking of what's coming along, suddenly, out of nowhere, Spaceship Graveyard turns up on Moonbase Alpha's doorstep. And the only reason given is, well, the moon has drifted, so I guess these spaceships have drifted as well.
Right. Yeah.
That's glossed over really quickly.
Yeah, well, you think about how much the moon has traveled in all the 800 and some odd days through black suns and space warps. I mean, all kinds of things have happened to them.
Yeah.
But to me, that sort of like totally logically implausibleness of it sort of adds to the kind of mythical aspect of the story, where it's like, it's kind of a personal connection between Tony and this thing that is
the monster has kind of gone Tony out,
as if it has followed him to the far end, literally to the far end of the universe.
Yeah,
in some way.
I sort of wish they had brought that question up. Therefore,
to give it a bit more.
Yeah, I think if that scene had the problem is you're in main mission when that scene plays out. They go to main mission, and that's where they take a look at the spaceships and go, how did that happen? What happened there? Therefore, because you're in main mission and you've got all this equipment and all these people around you, you expect them to know the answer to that. Whereas if that scene had taken place just in the hospital, in the medical bay or something, and they could have talked about it a bit more from more of a philosophical point of view, that probably would have helped, I think, get that across slightly better.
Yeah, or if maybe if Cellini had seen the spaceship graveyard initially, if we've got his reaction to it right off the bat, to see his recognition, and then everybody knows, oh, this thing is, and get some more sense of how he felt. Perhaps, I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to see.
Because Koenig is in command and everyone trusts Koenig, and Koenig's the good guy, everyone feels pretty secure in the idea of let's go out there and investigate further. And despite the fact that everything seems to be going Cellini's way, like he's being believed finally for the first time in the whole episode, like everyone seems to be behind him, everyone seems to be supporting him, he goes and whacks Alan Carter again. And acquisitions the Eagle all for himself, because he's going to go and fight this beast alone. It's very much his battle. And there's a little bit of time wasted in Eagle 2 comes and picks up the pod for Eagle 1 and goes, and they go off after him and all of that. It gets slightly drawn out and slightly delayed, but the point that we get to is it's Tony versus the monster round 2.
Yep.
What has changed since the beginning, since that first encounter? How does Tony go about it differently this time?
Well, he's got a few more tools. He doesn't really bring any heavy artillery. He brings more knives. He brings a grappling hook and a rope to kind of, but he doesn't sort of fully engage with it in like, he doesn't bring any heavy artillery, as I say.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's sort of caught in this romantic ideal that he has of like redeeming, and that's sort of part of his like fatal flaw, to use that term again. His hamartia is like that he feels like it's this personal quest for redemption,
Right.
that he has to go out on his own and face this thing. You know, they couldn't just shoot the spaceship from the Eagle and
Yeah.
destroy the whole thing. You know, that would be too easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's at the end of it all, skipping ahead slightly, it disturbs me, and they do have a plausible reason for it in the story. Like Helena says in the narration, I think that they had to get back to Alpha before the moon drifted away.
Right.
So they couldn't stay and explore that spaceship graveyard. They couldn't do a scientific. But if you didn't have time to do the exploration, you could have just blown it away. So it seems like a bit of a contradiction.
Yeah.
But yeah, sort of a fatal flaw of Cellini, where he has to go personally and man to man, 1-on-1 defeat this monster.
Yeah.
And
he gets right up in its grill. He's right there.
He does well. He does much better this time.
He decides the best place to stab it is right above the eye, so that we get a really good look at the, I'm going to say, strawberry jam that just exudes from this.
It does have a strawberry jam.
It's like the blood flow is like, it's not quite enough blood, I want to say.
Yeah, and I wonder if that was a restriction of the time where they felt like they couldn't show too much, gore, but it definitely needs it. It definitely feels like more of that kind of like Italian giallo type
it
blood
needs
flow
to be slightly more visceral, considering how nasty and grisly it is when you see the dead corpses being spat out of the monster. It's a shame in a way it doesn't suffer an even more gruesome demise. Instead, it's just Cellini standing there, stabbing it over and over and over again. With and the monster again, because it's a static thing and it just has these tentacles kind of writhing around. You don't get a full sense that it is dying. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the whole intention.
Yeah, maybe it's not meant to be.
It's
I do wish.
Yeah,
I do wish that maybe they had conveyed the impression that Tony blinded it, and that therefore made it possible for Koenig to come behind him and kill it.
Yeah, something that could have weakened its power. Yeah,
I think that's what they were going for, but it doesn't quite come across.
Right. Yeah, there is a slight sense that scene, that second fight scene, wasn't quite as well planned as or quite as well rehearsed as the first one had been. Which is,
but of course we're criticizing it from the benefit of hindsight and 50 years of other films being made, and they had 9 days to crank this thing out.
And for 9 days on the set, amazing, absolutely.
It's a really impressive conclusion, and it's of course Koenig comes in and it saves the day heroically, thanks to
because Tony dies. Tony gets eviscerated, and has all that horrible stuff happen to him in the gap beneath the monster. I still don't buy that he just gets pulled along the floor and something goes on behind the scene. Again, very theatrical. Where he's just get pulled off set, and then something happens to him that we don't see, and then this rotting corpse gets thrown back on the set. It's very, very theatrical in a way that it's striking, but I don't know if it's necessarily up to the usual production standards that you would see in.
Well, it forces you to imagine what could be happening.
Exactly.
Behind that. One final thing on the monster that I forgot to mention earlier is the use of light. A lot of times we think about, the monstrous as darkness, as kind of like a black shape. But in Space 1999, in this and in Force of Life, which is the other great monstrous horror episode of year one, the Force is kind of a light. It's kind of a glowing thing that could be interpreted almost like angelically in a different context.
Yeah, but it's kind of cold. Well, it's like this white, it's this harsh white light, so it kind of feels cold rather than warm. It's cleverly played with there, that's for sure. So then, as far as finishing off the episode goes, Koenig stabs the thing until it stops, basically, and then when they get out of it, basically it ends with Helena and John questioning, yeah, well, it never registered as a life form, so was it ever really alive? So did we ever kill it? And that's in a typical year one way. That's how we end, with questioning the very nature of reality, of course.
And the nature of mythology is Cellini part of, because they're sort of like headed for somewhere where they're going to start a new colony, when they're going to settle down. Is Cellini going to be part of their mythology now? The man who fought the monster, the man who no one believed. They talk about that, kind of speculate about what role he might play.
Which I think is getting ahead of themselves a little bit. But
there's still
it's an interesting question, that's for sure. But I don't know if they need to talk about it right now.
Well, it's like Space 1999 is such a, it's like a disaster movie in space. Like it's a survival story of how they survived this great big disaster. But now they've reached the point where there's so many episodes in that they're kind of like comfortable with their liminal status of not being in orbit, and being in constant danger. So they're sort of like on the edges there between that like danger zone and that we need to start thinking about planning a new future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is an interesting place to be. The only place to be. Right in between.
Very interesting place to be. Yeah, that's for sure. So, as far as you're concerned, this episode's reputation is, generally regarded as one of the best Space 1999 episodes. Do you think that stands, and anything from our discussion that solidifies or maybe negates that idea? Do you think?
I kind of came into it feeling a bit more like I suspect you did coming into it, where we both have said it wasn't one of our favorites. But over the years, it's really won me over, this episode.
Right.
I think it does deserve a lot of the hype it gets. And I think it's, but also a lot of the kind of like worst criticisms of Space 1999 are true of this episode in a lot of ways. So it represents kind of the highs and the lows of the whole Anderson canon. And that's sort of the yin and the yang of it, I guess.
Don't think I couldn't put it any better myself, except to say that, I think there are, in terms of the scope and the scale of what Space 1999 could be, I think this is not necessarily the best example of that, but it's a really interesting tangent that it takes, as I say, with the flashbacks and the world building and all of that stuff. I think it is therefore very valuable as an episode because of that. But I think that there are certainly episodes that I enjoy more, and I think that there are episodes that stand out more. But I can understand why, as a piece of television in 1975, why it made such a big impact, because it is, as I say, something different. And I think that's very important. I think that's what TV should do. When you've got that opportunity, when you've got a long running series, you should do different things with it. And this is definitely that. So I think that's great.
It is exceptional, but not representational.
Exactly that. Yes. To that end, we have had some comments from our viewers that I wanted to highlight. A few things from social media, because we asked you what you thought of Dragon's Domain, and we have a couple of things to read. So I'm going to start on Blue Sky. This is from Simpsons Clips 24. He says, Dragon's Domain, apart from sounding like the title of a Lavender Castle episode, seems to be a precursor to Alien, which you mentioned. Think about it. Both of them feature the crew of a spaceship encountering a sinister creature that picks off said crew one by one. I mean, obviously this is a TV show, so it has to do it slightly faster than what Alien manages. But I think I agree with that. Bucket Master Beatty says, I mean, the episode has the grandiose factor to really make it feel like one of the all-time greats. But in execution, the monster just kind of stands there menacingly. If the threat had been just a little more palpable, if a little more time were given to the design, then it could have worked. Which is sort of what we've been debating this whole time, is did the monster need to do more, or was it actually the perfect kind of threat for that for that situation.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from people who feel that way, what direction they would have taken the monster in
Exactly.
if they had been in that situation.
And then on Facebook, friend of the show, Mr. Andrew Clements, has commented saying, overhyped. Don't get me wrong, it's a great episode, but as good as they'd have you believe, I don't think so. I was expecting a literal dragon, so the tentacle monster always seemed a bit of a letdown. Sorry. Ruffling a few feathers there, of course, because that started a whole conversation actually on our Facebook page, where Harry Blythe stepped in to say, watching as a child in the 70s, I too was S-word scared to be concerned about accurate trade descriptions. And then Wayne Oates says, isn't it referred to as the dragon as a take on George and the Dragon? It's mentioned in the episode. And yeah, that's the whole thing. The label of dragon is like, well, that's something that's referring back to mythology and all of that. Is the title misleading? I don't know. Not something I ever really thought about.
I don't really think so, personally, because of reasons that I've outlined in our discussion here. I feel like it's sort of a metaphorical approach, and the dragon, it's sort of a modern take on the dragon, where, you know, we sort of like in our rational age, we no longer believe in monsters like that, and we no longer have that need for them to be on our maps for the places that we don't understand.
Yeah.
But the sort of point of Space 1999 is that there's still stuff that we don't understand out there. There's still things that are unknowable.
Exactly.
Which is part of what they're trying to do here, I think.
Yeah. We had a couple of live comments as well, which I wanted to call out. People talking about their love or slight loathing for Space 1999 in general that I wanted to kind of bring up. So Willow says, it's not that I don't like Space 1999. I just feel that it lacks some of the warmth and character depth as the other Jerry Anderson shows. I think you can feel the tension in the creative team, and that's something you talked about at the very beginning of the show, what was kind of going on between Jerry and Sylvia. Maybe that flavored what was going on with the production, which I think is fair enough. Totally welcome to kind of feel that way. You don't, and I'm exactly the same. I'm like, Space 1999 is just not my favorite thing, but I can see what they were going for and why. I can understand why so many people like it in the way they do. And people like Andrew Scott commented saying, one of my favorite shows of all time, the Eagle Transporter is my favorite spaceship, as my empty bank account will attest to. I had 3 of the Zika toys Eagles on pre-order. So yeah, there's someone who really enjoys it. Gerald Lang says, my favorite episode, seen this as a kid in its original run here in the US as a kid in the mid 70s. And great. I think we've said already that so many people, when they saw it 50 years ago, it really made an impact on them. And I think those are the people who really enjoyed this episode. But I hope that what this discussion that Ben and I have been having, it just goes to show that even 50 years later, there is so much to take from this episode. If you're going in just expecting it to be the big monster episode of Space 1999, you maybe need to adjust your expectations just a little bit and know that there's more to it than that. The monster fighting aspect of it is only one part of it, and actually the story has so much more to offer than that. So I think that's really important. Those were our viewer comments. Nice kind of balance there.
Thank you everybody. I really do appreciate hearing views that are different from my own. That's part of why we do this, to get feedback from you, whether you feel completely differently to it, especially if you feel completely differently to it than us, because that's part of what makes it so interesting, is that I can come to this episode and see one thing, Jack can come to it and see another. And that's part of what gives it such richness and depth, is all the different takes that people have on it. So it's really great. Thank you.
That is what the Security Hazard Show is here for. Absolutely. So thank you everyone for watching and listening. If you joined us live, thank you so much. We broadcast live every single Wednesday, 6 p.m. UK time, on youtube.com/Jack Knoll. So subscribe to us on YouTube so that you can watch us live and you can post comments in real time. And it's just a wonderful wonderful experience. It's really great. And of course, on my YouTube channel, there's also lots of other Jerry Anderson themed videos. So lots to enjoy there. Security Hazard Show is also available on lots of other platforms, podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, that kind of thing. If you would rather listen to us, as I'm sure many of you do, if you are listening on one of those podcast platforms, please rate and review us, because that really helps us to reach a whole new audience with this sort of stuff. It's really good fun. So yeah, definitely recommend doing that.
Yeah, and as we've alluded to already, please support us on Patreon, patreon.com/securityhazard. As Jack likes to say, give what you can, but only if you can. And then you can gain access to some exclusive videos and commentaries that you won't see anywhere else, because we've got a lot of cool stuff coming there,
Yes,
and a lot of stuff
absolutely.
up already. It is a preloaded Patreon.
Absolutely. So that's there, patreon.com/securityhazard. But for everything else, head to securityhazard.net. That's your one-stop shop. That is where to go to get blog posts, reviews, videos, podcasts about all things Jerry Anderson, links to all my social media on there, things like Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, all of that. It's all there. Just look for Security Hazard. Ben, how about you? Where can people find you on social media?
Well, I'm on YouTube at Cinemarionette, and I'm also at Cinemarionette on Twitter, aka X. And you can find me on Blue Sky at Ben Wolf Page. You can also find links to my Starfleet blog, the puppet movie that I'm making called Astral Beacon, and so many other things that I'm doing on the internet. They're all on benwolf.page. benwolf.page.
Very clever. Very, very clever. I commend you for buying that domain. That was very speaking of domains. Now there's a good domain.
Ben Wolf domain. Ben Wolf's
Love it.
domain. The Wolf's
Love it.
domain? Yeah, that works.
Yeah, why not? We have the Dragon's domain. Why not the Wolf's domain? Let's go
Why
for that.
not?
Well, thank you all very much for watching. That's all for today's show, and we will see you next week. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.